So today you're going to be sitting in the session that we have titled, Perfection is the Enemy of Life-Saving, Learn to Work in the Gray. So I am Jill Hankey. I'm the Director of Operations at Gateway Pet Guardians in East St. Louis, Illinois. We run the largest pet resource center in the Midwest. Our annual intake is about 1,600. We are a private shelter without a government contract, yet we're taking in 90% of strays directly from our service area. So we really operate more like a stray intake organization. Turn it over to Stacy.
I'm Stacy Rogers. I'm the Regional Director for the Midwest and Great Plains region with Best Friends Animal Society. So I help shelters across a 15-state region increase their life-saving. Prior to that, I was the executive director of a small rural shelter with a contract in Indiana. We operated out of a building built in 1985, which was when it was last updated. We operated for a long time at a several $100,000 deficit. So we definitely learned how to work in that gray and figure out how to make the best of what we had, because we knew we wanted to save lives, but we definitely did not have the ideal situation to do it in.
All right, just to set the tone for the session. We listen and we do not judge, right? If you're seeing that TikTok trend. We may talk about some things today that feel uncomfortable for you, right? We're really pushing the envelope on what we can do to save lives and thinking outside the box. And so some of these things may feel really uncomfortable for you, so we just ask that you reserve judgment and understand that we're doing it with the right reasons in mind, and that all of our regions vary in terms of what the needs are within our communities, right? So we listen and we do not judge. All right, so first things first, we want to get an idea of who we've got in the room. So we are going to play the Mentimeter game, where if you can scan that QR code there, we just want to know what type of organizations are most represented in the room. So we'll give you guys about 15, 20 seconds to do that.
And our tech skills did not allow us to remove our test samples, but the original two answers did apply to Jill and I at both organizations. So we're like, okay, we'll just leave those there.
All right, answers are coming in. It looks like we are a little more heavily weighted toward private shelters and rescues, but then equally we have municipal and private with contracts. So in theory, we're talking about equal folks with contracts and folks potentially without contracts, right? So we've got a good balance in the room. I do think a lot of these things that we're going to talk about today can be applicable in both types of organizations. So we'll kind of go into that. Obviously, if you have questions on how it applies to you, we'll plan on taking questions more toward the end. All right. Oh, now it gives us the final answer. It didn't tell you at first. Got it. All right, next question. We have a slight tech question. It is going to come up, but I know the question, so you can start thinking about how you're going to answer in your mind. If you had somebody come to your door, how many of you guys currently have a foster program? That's where we're going to start. Thank you. We believe in foster, right? Foster is my favorite F word, is a shirt that we're developing for our volunteer. Yeah, so jot that down. That can be your main takeaway. Foster is my favorite F word, and I've been told since this is recording today to be careful with the F words, but we'll say foster as much as we want. So it seems like a lot of people have, we're going to go with it. It seems like a lot of people have foster programs. Now I'm going to ask you another question, and this is where it gets into the we listen and we do not judge. So how many of you are trying the finder to foster approach, meaning engaging Good Samaritans and housing the pets that they find? More than I expected. Okay, great. Now let me ask you a question. If that finder to foster comes to you and your only option for them to keep that pet as a foster is for them to keep that pet outside, would you explore that option? Raise your hand if the answer is yes. Slightly fewer hands, right? That makes us a little bit uncomfortable. And we can jump ahead.
I think it might have come up if we want to give them the chance to answer without feeling the guilt of raising your hand.
I don't. Do they need the QR code again, or they still have it?
There, it's coming.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely. We just have to wait on technology. So if you guys, yes, we've got people responding now, so people can do that. So yeah, go ahead and type in there without the pressure of everybody looking to see whether you held your hand up or not, whether you would be comfortable allowing a finder to foster the dog even though they had to keep that dog outside.
It's not so cut and dry though. It's
Sure. There's certainly going to be regional differences that don't make this as straightforward necessarily. But when I get into the comments here, I'm just going to let everybody see where we landed. So 41% or 41 responders said they would give support to the dog to keep it safely outside. The others said take the dog without having a kennel open, right? So just a friendly reminder, if we're going to make comments or questions, they want us to talk into the box so that that gets recorded on the recording. So, you know, a little less than half of folks said, you know what, let's figure it out. Let's keep the animal outside if that's what has to happen, right? And that's really what we're talking about, right? So we do a lot of finder to foster programs. I have my colleague Sarah Cordovant in the room. She is our intake and diversion manager. She is the gatekeeper to animals coming into our building, and she fully understands the importance of open kennel space, right? Because we need our kennel space to be open for sick, injured, emaciated, pregnant, nursing, those emergency cases. So we have to treat every animal walking into us and every good Samaritan bringing us an animal as an opportunity to transition them to foster, even when it means keeping them outside. So what we do is we actually deliver supplies. So we're taking a doghouse, we're taking a tie out. If it's cold, we're taking straw. We're providing food, we're providing the resources that they need. And most importantly, we're treating them just like a foster. They have to fill out the foster application, which hits the liability waiver, and then they have the contact information to get a hold of us for emergencies or for any questions they have medically, right? We don't leave them out on a limb out there with the dog. So we do this a lot, right? We're not in a position right now to intake and continue to push our capacity for care beyond its limits, right? We can't keep doing that every day. So what's the alternative, right? You say, well, I might need to check all these things, but the alternative is my organization turning them down and giving them a list of 20 other organizations to go try that are also going to turn them down because they're also full, right? So do I want to send them on the rat race and wash my hands of it? Or do I want to give them a viable solution to be part of this life-saving effort? They cared about the animal, they picked it up, they cared enough to come to us. Let's convince them to care enough to keep it for us until we actually have kennel space to bring them in and we can triage them into our intake list. So my big advice is always call everything a pilot. Like if you're not doing this, pilot it, right? So then people can't give you as much pushback because you're just piloting it. You're trying it on for size. You're seeing how it feels, right? You're seeing if you have the right resources in place to support it. But I will tell you, what this program and a few other things in terms of transfer increases, but this finder to foster approach, even with keeping dogs outside, has allowed us to increase our intake capacity by 32% in 1 year. We were able to take in 400 more animals in 1 year because we're leaning on this as a solution to not taking up our shelter, kennels, and space that are so valuable to us. And then we've continued to see this year-over-year return to owner growth because of this. We're keeping animals directly in the community, right where they were found, so we know that they're more likely to go home. We know that most lost dogs are only 100 yards or less away from where they went missing, right? So driving them 30 minutes away to the shelter isn't really gonna solve the problem. All right, programs in imperfect spaces. I'm going to show you our isolation room. Oh, we're not going to show you the isolation room. Okay, little tech problem. We'll jump back. Let me paint the picture. We have one big, giant, wide open classroom, no walls. On this side, we have cat kennels. On this side, we have makeshift dog pens. There's no separate ventilation. There's none of that. And that's our isolation space, right? Honestly, when I give tours to the building, I'm so embarrassed, right? Like it's not something I'm proud to show. Although when I'm showing funders, I was like, see how much help we need? This is where we isolate our animals. So, you know, it's hard to imagine that in some scenarios, and it's a little bit embarrassing to show them that space, but what's not embarrassing is we're saving 95% of parvo puppies that come into our care, right? I hear organizations say, oh, we don't have isolation space, so we can't take parvo. Find a bathroom, find a closet, find a corner of the building and decide that that's what you're gonna make happen, right? Like that's how we have to be thinking as we're approaching 2025 and this mission of achieving no-kill status is what is that next layer of animals that you can save in your community and find ways to do it. Don't let facility limitations be what holds you back. And again, our save rate on medical is we only had to say goodbye to 3.8 medical euthanasia or died in care cases. So even with a makeshift ISO space, we're really able to save a lot of lives being willing to use that. I will flip over and let Stacy talk to you about this space.
Yeah, so part of my role as regional director, I visit a lot of shelters. And what we hear a lot from groups who are wanting to save more lives is we can do this once we get the new building. Like, we need a better space, our space is terrible, we can't do it here, but as soon as we get that new building, then everything is gonna be better. Well, unfortunately, even if you have the money to build a new building, it takes a long time. So you have to be able to figure out how to do it with what you have. And these pictures are from a shelter in Southeast Missouri. Actually, the shelter of somebody who now works for me as a strategist. And she invited us down because she wanted us to help her save more cats. The building on the left was their temporary cat space. And you can also see their dog kennels there. The cat room was immediately in front of it. And my strategist at the time and I went in to visit, and she's like, what can we do to save more cats in here? And we're like, I'm not sure. This is a very tiny space with very poor ventilation. But the thing is, she actually figured out how to get her shelter above 90% in this space before she ever got the pretty new building that is now sitting in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. They worked a lot with transports to get dogs out of those kennels. They did a lot of adoptions to get dogs moved through there quickly, knowing it was not an ideal space. Those dogs would much prefer to be in a home, so they did everything they could. She, in something that we'll talk about later, realized that she was not contractually obligated to take cats. So she stopped taking trapped cats that came to the door because she knew they were gonna die in her shelter. So she reduced her intake. And now they have a beautiful cat space. They have a TNR program in the area. They're figuring things out. But it's about figuring out first, like, what are we gonna do? Because we're probably never gonna have the best space possible. Even new buildings have issues. So it's looking at, how can we reconfigure this? Can we put something elsewhere? Can we just build out our foster program so the animals don't have to be in this building for a longer period of time? There's always gonna be something you can do, and it's just getting out there and trying to make it work. That's what we used a lot in my shelter. If you were Project Runway fans, we were the Tim Gunn, make it work. Figure out the solution. We're gonna do it today. If there's problems, we'll work through those as we work on the programs, but we're not gonna sit in that analysis paralysis of trying to figure it out.
Yeah, so next up we'll talk about heartworm treatment protocols. So how many of you guys have ventured into the world of slow kill heartworm treatment? A few hands, right? So this is where, perfection is the enemy of life-saving. We all know what the American Heartworm Association says. We all know what, the Cadillac standard is of heartworm treatment, right? But what we were facing at our shelter and in our community was that animals at our local municipal shelter were being euthanized strictly for having heartworms, right? There wasn't enough rescues to pull them. They weren't highly engaged with sponsorship money at the time, and so we were seeing a lot of large breed dogs with heartworms being euthanized for no other reason other than the fact that they had heartworms, right? But we're also looking at our teeny tiny budget saying, there ain't no way we can spend $700, $800, $900 per dog, to treat these animals. So what are we going to do? So from 2019 to 2022, Gateway Pet Guardians utilized slow kill heartworm treatment. I will tell you, it was mixed reviews, right? Some dogs took a lot longer to test out for us. We were getting some pushback from private veterinarians that once the dog was adopted and they learned the dog was either in the midst of slow kill treatment or had gone through it, they were telling the adopters that this was not best practice and that we were cutting corners. So there were definitely hiccups along the way. I'm not here to tell you that that was an easy prospect for us, but what it allowed us to do is take in 26 more adult dogs from our municipal shelter, right? 26% more dogs, right? That amount of life-saving made it worth it to us to try something unconventional. We worked with our veterinarians who wrote beautifully written letters explaining our approach to this, explaining that we know it's not American Heartworm Association stamped. We did a lot of work ahead of time to make sure adopters knew this information, could share it. We had letters written from our veterinarian to their personal veterinarian, speaking veterinarian language, right? We decided that we were just gonna tackle it. Now I'll tell you that we have abandoned it, right? For us, when we started to really do the cost analysis for us, And we also now have veterinarian services in-house, so we now have 2 full-time veterinarians. So our resources changed on what we could offer. So we have abandoned slow kill now, but it was good enough for us then, and I would recommend it for anybody now if you're facing those challenges in your community where heartworm positive dogs aren't getting a shot and it's resource-based. I'd highly encourage you to think about trying it, piloting it, see what it feels like, see what it looks like, see what your veterinarians say, and kind of push that envelope to make sure heartworms is not something that is a death sentence in your communities.
Okay, hopefully we'll just give you your next one to start.
I'll speak through it while, what percentage, you're just answering, would you adopt to somebody that's on your pet food pantry program or receiving other subsidized or free services from you? Would you adopt them another pet? Uh-oh, here comes Alexander, our savior.
Yeah.
It looked like 6 people had answered, or 8 now.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, so we'll give you a few minutes to get all your answers in. Okay, so we are getting a pretty good mix of people who say you will adopt out to a client who uses your food pantry. Guessing we're starting to get towards the end there. I think we have about 65 people who seem to be voting. Okay, so the next question, and hopefully this one will populate and we don't still have the same problems. If you just want to do a show of hands, how many of you would adopt out to someone who came through your doors that day to surrender a different pet? The same day. Okay. So we really want to think about, is perfect what we're seeking in our adopters? When I started in animal welfare, we definitely were looking for just that perfect home. We thought we went to find the very best so they never end up in a shelter again. However, we didn't save many animals at that point because we were seeking for a very long time just those perfect adopters. And the barriers we were putting in place were what were preventing us from saving more lives. Whether now it's preventing, even if you're a private rescue, if you have a lot of barriers, it might be preventing you from moving more animals through your group, which could allow you to save more pets from another shelter. This particular dog was Bandit. The person who adopted him was on our food pantry program periodically over the years. He came in to look. Bandit was a small dog, but a little bit bigger than what most people wanting a really tiny dog wanted. He was kind of nondescript. He was kind of middle-aged. He'd been sitting in our small dog room for quite a while. And my team came to me and they said, this man wants to adopt him. We think he might have been homeless and he's used our food pantry for a long time. And I said, if he thinks he can give him a good home, we're gonna do the adoption. So we adopted Bandit to Edwin, and we told him lots of things when he adopted. We gave him all the information on Bandit, but we also said, if ever you have issues, come back to us. We want to help you be successful in your adoption. He happened to live in the neighborhood by our shelter. We saw him walking him almost every day. He was on disability, so he wasn't working. He was always out. He was always wearing his microchip ID tag. When he lost his housing, he came back to us and said, I don't want to surrender him, but my situation is not good right now. So I'll talk about our crisis program later, but Bandit was kind of the inaugural crisis fostering because I said, put him in my office. We'll keep him for Edwin until he has housing again. Wasn't the best way to run a crisis program at the time, but we made it work. He came back for Bandit. We ended up housing him twice throughout Bandit's life until the end of his life. He was in kidney failure. Edwin had taken care of him. We helped him make the decision. And it was a great adoption. And we really embraced trying to find the perfect pet for each person, but in those imperfect situations, because we knew that adopters were going to come to us wanting to adopt, and we wanted to make sure that we could adopt as many animals as possible, whether it seemed like what we might have 15 years previously thought was the perfect home. We also at one point got a call from a man who said he was getting older. He thought it wasn't time any longer to have big dogs, so he bought a Yorkie puppy. And then he said he discovered he hated small dogs. He's like, I don't want this puppy anymore. It's irritating, it's tiny. Can I bring it to you? He's like, I've already spayed her. can I bring her in, surrender her, and adopt a big dog? He brought us a 4-month-old spayed Yorkie. We adopted it out to somebody in our lobby before it ever hit a kennel because she had all of her vaccines. And he adopted like an 8-year-old pit bull from the back. And we were like, this was a great trade. He was much happier. The people who got the Yorkie puppy were thrilled. And there would have been a time when it would have been like, well, you need to think about it, come back. If you can't take care of one pet, you shouldn't get another. So it's really working through that we can't be stuck on trying to make everything perfect. And I think that's tough because this field is filled with a lot of type A people who want everything just so to make it happen. And you've really got to kind of back away from that and be like, this is good enough. Like, we're far enough, we can make this work. We don't need to get perfect.
Perfect. All right, let's talk about volunteers. Raise your hand if you utilize volunteers. Put your hands down. Raise your hand if you don't utilize volunteers. Excellent, right? A couple people, and I understand that there's some reasons. I'm guessing you're municipal-ish?
No, we work with young people, so that's the primary purpose of our program.
Different focus,
Yeah.
Gotcha. So volunteers are critical, right, to our organizations, but when you're over capacity and understaffed, I think we're all looking to volunteers, right, to offload some of that imbalance. But how many of you are allowing walk-in volunteers to your organization? They show up the same day, they get to work. Not as many, right? Our organization is the same, and we're actually working through this year. It's one of our top goals. Right now, in order to walk dogs at our organization, you have to sign up online, come to an 1.5-hour orientation about the organization, get a tour, and then in order to walk dogs, you have to sign up for a Green Paw mentor shift, which is an 1.5-hour long shift where you work alongside another volunteer. And then we give you the leash, and you can walk a dog by yourself, right? It seems crazy to me, and again, I've been in charge of this program for a while, so it's my fault, right? But it seems crazy to me that we will send a dog out the door as fast as we can, whether it's a field trip, whether it's a slumber party, whether it's a foster. We're like, sure, you sign a form, you walk out with a dog, but yet to come to our facility and walk a dog, we have these barriers in place, right? Because we're so worried somebody won't take the right walking path, or they won't do the kennel routine exactly right, or heaven forbid they forget to pick up the poop, right? Like, let's get over that, right? Let's invite them in. So that's one of the things that we are actually working on, is really trying to take away any barrier there is for our community to help us, right? And we know that there might be a few incidences, right? We know that things may not go perfectly, but we have to figure out how, in a moment's notice, we can put out a call and get people into our building to help us manage high census, manage crisis situations, which we'll talk about here. But really engaging volunteers and finding ways to get them in your door immediately and take away any of those barriers that prevent that is really something that we're aspiring to do a better job at. Because like I said, I think our intentions were really good when we developed our volunteer program, but our organization has morphed a ton in the last 5 to 7 years, and it's time to take a relook at our program and really take some of those barriers out of the way to let our community help. And we've done this without really having the infrastructure, right? So we don't have an SOP on it. We're not, we don't have a plan. But on occasion, we've had to put out calls to the public and said, come one, come all, we're going to need help. So one of the examples is, what you'll see in the bottom picture is our local animal control facility flooded. You probably saw it on the national news, dogs standing up to their waist in water, swimming their way out. A tragic event at our animal control. But we just opened up the floodgates and said, come one, come all. We need fosters, we need people that are cleaning kennels, we need people to walk the dogs off the bus. And we had this line of people within an hour's notice lined up willing to help us tackle that challenge, right? Nope. All they did is sign a quick liability waiver that I'm confident they didn't read. And then they were off to do whatever we told them to do. They didn't have an apron to wear. We just made it work, right? What was the alternative in that moment? Leave the animals swimming in water? Was that what I was going to do? Or was I going to figure it out in that moment and just trust that our team was going to rally behind us and make sure with this, swarm of people that we were going to figure it out and that somebody was going to take over, kind of calling shots and directing traffic and making it work? And long story short, we didn't lose one dog during that flood, right? So that's the power of just bringing volunteers in and letting them help you without having all these barriers and, trying to say, oh, you have to make sure that you're, Orange Paw certified in order to help with this or that. Take those barriers out of out of the way. It's good for pets, it's good for your staff, it's good for life-saving, but it's a really money saver. So if your folks are in the room and you're like, I'm just talking about money, you know, there are these equations that can tell you what your volunteer hours are worth. You should be touting that, right? Engage those volunteers and help them increase your life-saving, but don't focus on perfect. These people do not have to be animal behaviorists to come in and walk dogs in your building, right? They need to know how to hold a leash, basically. So don't let that get into your way.
Yeah, and I think with volunteers too, you know, it's realizing that they all aren't going to be perfect and you are going to run into issues. So you do want to make sure you have the way to work that out when you do have issues, but it's remembering that the good is going to be better and it's going to help your staff with the compassion fatigue. Because we all know animal welfare employees are overworked, they're tired, they're burnt out. Hopefully not as much if they're here in this beautiful weather this week. But you know, the volunteers are going to help bring that stress level down, which is going to be good for everybody, including the animals, because the animals are going to feed off of that stress if your team is stressed. One of the areas where we frequently see imperfect things happen is whether you report to a board of directors or your city municipality, a council, city officials, the mayor. It's probably never going to be that ideal group of people that you were hoping for. You know, I had some great board members over the years, but never did I have a board where every one of my board members was somebody I was thrilled with sitting there at each board meeting ready to make decisions for my shelter. So I think as we embrace the imperfectness of the boards, it's learning to really play the political game, whether it's politics in your municipality or your nonprofit, and figuring out who are your allies. If you're going to work on a new program that you need board approval for, make sure when you attend the board meeting, you know you already have the votes to make that pass if you need them. You know, it's meeting with people individually, talking through it, figuring out what their why is for why they are going to be in support of what you want to do, and making sure that you have somebody that's going to be your spokesperson so that they can work through it and make sure the scales are tipping in the direction that you want them to. Because things can quickly go sideways. You know, none of us get to run the shelter completely by ourselves because we all have a board of directors or a city or a county who's working to try to oversee it. So, you know, figuring out that balance is going to be the ideal way to get consensus. So I think as you think it through, it's really, you know, what can we do? Where can we compromise? Who is going to be my biggest advocate? Even can I get people on the board who I know are going to advocate for what I want to happen? You know, if you have board openings and you have any kind of ability to put people into that role, like look for people who you think have the same philosophies you do, the same goals for the shelter or the rescue that you want to happen, because likely you aren't going to have a lot of control over that. You know, we could talk all day about board of directors and what kind of policies and procedures they should have in place to make sure it's not a complete disaster. But you know, you're going to have to work with what you have. You might be working, as I was, in an organization with no board term limits and board members who had been there since the early 1980s and didn't have any intention to leave, and mostly were there just because they got to drink beer at the board meetings. So you need to make sure you're getting the right people to kind of offset the ones who have just been there forever and are okay with the status quo. And then you're going to be able to kind of tip those scales over and make things happen that are really going to improve the life-saving and the operations and the programs that you want to have going forward.
So we're going to do another Mentimeter poll. How many of you are actually going out into your community and doing community outreach? Oh, went away on Mentimeter? Raise your hands again, just in case we don't get the poll back. Good. It seems like probably more than half, I would guesstimate, is doing field work out there in the community, whether that is through municipal or private. Raise your hand if you're a private shelter without a contract doing community outreach. Fewer numbers, right? But all of us are gonna get together at the end so we can share war stories. All right, if you can hit the Mentimeter now, it should be working. So weigh in on, you do community outreach in the field, or you have an outreach program that doesn't go out in the field, but maybe it's working at community events, health fairs, anything like that where you're giving out information, or if you're actually getting out in the field, distributing supplies, doing welfare checks, that sort of thing. This Mentimeter thing worked flawlessly in practice, just FYI. Just FYI. Literally, perfection is the enemy of life-saving. Keep it moving.
We've
right?
done this on purpose.
This is intentional. This is intentional. So yeah, that's basically kind of what I got. There's probably more than half the room that's actually going out in the field and doing some outreach. So talking about outreach, one of the things that came up with our team was, okay, we're doing all this outreach, we're giving all this stuff away for free, but we're not tracking anything, right? We're gonna need some data to sustain this program, to grow this program, right? And for me, again, I oversee that team, I'm like, whatever. I just want them out in the field, taking care of animals, taking care of people, the numbers are the numbers, let's just raise money. Well, that's not gonna fly with some of my upper leadership, obviously. So when it came down to it, it was like, if you're gonna keep doing outreach, we're gonna have to have some data. We have to make a case for this. We have to solidify this program. And that's where it kind of goes into the gray. Outreach existed long before we ever solidified it as outreach, right? We didn't have SOPs, we didn't have standard operating procedures, we didn't do any of that. Just move it forward. We didn't do any of that, right? But the pushback kept coming, and I was like, we're finally going to have to do something in order to kind of calm down our executive director and our development team who are trying to fund this for us. So we ended up just giving our development team access to our outreach spreadsheet tracker, which is a manual process, right? Every single day that we go out on a Google Sheet, we have a tab with the date and everything that we are, all the stops that we're making. We are looking into a better software with actual reporting as we speak. But what we ended up just saying is, you know what, you have our outreach tracker, all we're gonna do is track touches, right? We're not tracking dog houses, tie-outs, we're working on that. That's the evolution of where we're heading, but all we're gonna do is track touches. How many visits, how many households did we visit, right? And that's just gonna be our baseline. And so we took that and then we said, times that, whatever that number is, let's say it's 1,000, times that by 20%, because there's a lot of things that don't end up on the spreadsheet, right? When somebody walks in and is like, there's a dog on the highway, we're not like, stop and put it into the outreach spreadsheet when we're gonna run out and take a look, right? We're running out to take care of the dog. So not everything makes it into the spreadsheet, and we know that. So we've acknowledged that imperfectness, right? But we established a baseline based on our scheduled visits times 20%, and now year over year we can measure against that and see that the program is growing, and that as we put more money in the program, we're getting more touches out into our community. And really that's what it's about. Now, as we get bigger, we've gained a staff member in that department, we're gonna work harder on more official tracking of dog houses and tie-outs and all of those things. But in order for us to get started, we didn't have to do that. And in order for us to continue to grow our community outreach program, we just found a simple metric that allowed us to start tracking something versus nothing and giving us a case to make to increase funding in that program. The other thing that we started doing is we have a retail store. Anybody else have a retail store that they operate? So what we started doing is now we check out, we let our retail store buy everything, and then we check out the resources that we're gonna use on outreach, and we just have a discount code, right? So that's how we can better track tie-outs and flea preventative and anything else that we're giving out when we head out into the field. That's a way for us to better track it. Again, it's not perfect because I'm probably the worst of them that'll grab a tie-out without checking it out and run out. But it still gives us some better measure than what we have before. Again, it's not perfect, it's not 100% accurate, but it helps us tell a story by starting to collect some of this data. And the reality is what that did is we started being able to solicit more funding. Right? We're growing our outreach. People love outreach. People love the work that we're doing trying to keep pets with their people. So by being able to quantify some of this, we're able to secure more funding and expand that program, which we all know is kind of the future of where we're heading in our industry.
Oh, look at that, it worked
Oh,
this
worked.
time.
Beautiful.
Okay, so who has ever started a program before your ordinances were correct to make it happen, or you had SOPs outlined? Glad to see we're getting lots of lawbreakers.
Rules are meant to be broken. Municipal shelters, put your fingers in your ear. Forgiveness
Yes.
forgiveness versus permission.
Okay, so getting lots of things. You know, SOPs are great. I'm somebody who loves them, but sometimes you got to start working on it or figure out the workaround for the ordinances that are there. So when I came to this conference in 2012, my shelter euthanized every fractious cat that came in. Our city ordinances had a leash law for cats. We were not allowed to re-release them out, and what are we gonna do? We can't release them. This is what happens. We left here and we said that isn't gonna happen again. But we're like, we don't have an ordinance, we can't release them. Animal control didn't work for me. We were contracted with the city. We're like, they're gonna get really angry if we just start letting cats back loose out. So we started a little colony at the shelter. Maybe not the smartest thing, because that's right where animal control sees that we have the cats loose. But it gave us one option. And I'm like, I grew up in the country, and like, we need barn cats. Like, that's our first option. We can release them. We didn't have a perfect system. We didn't have a great place to keep them. But we started soliciting barn homes. We went to our volunteers who had horses. We went to the local tractor supply store. We started moving cats out. This is actually my barn cat just chilling in our pasture. Not ear tipped, because she showed up spayed already, and they forgot to ear tip her when they put her under anesthesia. But we started it that way. We were just like, okay, we don't want to kill feral cats. We're gonna put these community cats back out where they wanna live. Ideally, it would be where they came from, but we can't do ideal right now. We have to go with imperfect to start. Then we started working on sample ordinances to take to our city to create a TNR program. And we did eventually get that passed. So then it was legal. We could do the TNR. We started having caretakers. We started re-releasing the cats. But we weren't gonna wait until we had everything perfectly in place to make it legal, or hundreds of more cats would have died before we ever got to that point with the city. And at that point, we were saving all the community cats in an imperfect way, and then we made it more perfect as we went along. We had more SOPs, we figured out better ways to house them, we figured out easier ways to transport them, because we maybe weren't the best at that either. There were a few times I might have had community cats chewing their way through cardboard cat boxes in my car while I tried to deliver them. But they were surviving, and we were saving lives, and we were doing it in the best way that we had possible at that time.
All right, my favorite topic, overcoming red tape with collaboration. So I really think the municipal shelters probably do this the best, in my opinion. But if you can't do it, who can, right? If your organization can't facilitate it, who can? And I'm gonna throw out some examples here. For example, our county cannot directly offer sponsorship money to a pulling group, right? The municipal cannot facilitate that. How many of you guys run a municipal and have a friends of group, right? Isn't that who we're traditionally leaning on for that type of support? Right? That makes sense to me, right? You can't do it, but who can? So if you're kind of finding yourself in that dilemma, who can you talk to in your network that might be willing to start that friends of group for you? Even if it's for small fundraising, even if it's for small sponsorships. This doesn't, again, have to be this ginormous thing, but let's start trying it out. Let's start feeling it out. Let's start asking our community for the help that we need. Saying, this dog needs an amputation. It's gonna cost $1,400 at the veterinarian. This dog will be euthanized if we cannot provide this surgery. Who can help chip in, right? We can do this, right? So we just have to figure out if it's not us, who, and let's make those partnerships. Other things in our county, when I found this out, I literally rolled my eyes because I'm like, makes no sense. But our county vehicles cannot leave the county. Anybody else run into that? Got another one where I'm just like, what? Like, how are we gonna transfer these fools? Well, for us, then we'll step into that role, right? We're a nonprofit. Nobody tells us where our vehicles can and can't go. And so if we have an opportunity to clear kennels in our local shelter, we're gonna do that. I mean, it doesn't matter to me whether we get credit for the, the transfer in or the transfer out. It's just freeing up kennels in our community because we know animals need those kennels, right? Stacy shared with me an example from Detroit. Detroit vehicles can leave the county, but they cannot fill up gas or use their gas card once they're outside the county. So when they drive 6 hours away to find life-saving results for these 15 cats, they can't drive home, right? Like, that seems crazy. Now, Stacy herself is personally funding gas for a lot of these transports, but how easy is that to put out a quick call to your volunteers and say, who can chip in on some gas cards, right? We've got a group that's willing to take 7 pit bulls and 32 cats, and we're going to make this happen. So we need $250 in gas money. Let's go, right? So if it's not your organization, who? And who are you partnering with? And who are you bringing in? Who cares who gets credit, right? Like, who cares who gets to put that number into their system? Let's just figure out ways to make it happen. All right.
Yeah, and Detroit was definitely that make it work example. Like, we had vans full of dogs ready to go. The rescues van broke down on the way to Detroit. They're like, we said we'd come clear these kennels today, but our van is broken. So we're like, okay, we'll drive them this way. Then we realized they couldn't leave without gas. Then we're like, can we take them personally? I drive a Mini Cooper, and I had my own car. I'm like, I can take a couple dogs, but not many. So yeah, we got some cash out of our wallets and said, go, because you need to get these dogs out. But it's just really trying to figure out those solutions. Yes, they
all were adopted, she said.
So yeah, it was a crisis foster. So it looks like kind of leaning towards as available but not official. A few with a full program, a few who don't have any program. And this is one of those things that we didn't do when our save rate was even 70%. It was kind of one of those things, once we were over 90, we started thinking about it, and yeah, I think we're probably, yeah, a few more towards the no than what we had. But as we thought about those new layers of like, what can we do now that we are saving lives, and we realized, the next step, we want to keep people with their pets. Even if we can place that animal into a new home, isn't it better that they stay in the home they had if that family really wants to keep their pet? So we started this in a very imperfect way. It did start originally, Toby was one of the first. There he is checking out my office window. But when Edwin came back to us with Bandit, I was like, okay, we're gonna figure out how to get him his dog back. We didn't have a good plan. We're like, well, we better have him surrender him as an owner's surrender in case he does get sick, which he did end up getting sick. But we're like, bring him in, we're like, try to be back in a month. We didn't have an official sign off for him. We didn't have great contact because he was without housing at the moment, but we're like, let's hope he shows up. And we kept him in my office because we didn't have kennel space to put him in the back. I'm like, I can have one more dog living in my office, it doesn't really matter. He did come back. We were excited. We're like, okay, we need to start making this work. Then we took in Toby and his sister from a lady who was living in her car. Again, we were just kind of like, come back when you can get them. That's not the smartest way to start a program without having a lot of formalization to it. But what we really realized was this was a good thing. People were coming back for their pets because they really, really wanted them. So how can we kind of formalize this now that we've seen it is a good thing? We feel really good when they come back for their pets. It's keeping pets and people together. So we started setting a few more boundaries. We started working a lot with more local human service nonprofits so that when we took those pets in, that person had an advocate at a local agency that we could reach out to when we needed help. That's how we reached Edwin when Bandit was crashing with kidney disease, was that we were able to call transitional housing and have them locate him to have him come to the shelter with us. We still didn't have great boundaries because we were helping cover the treatment while we were waiting on Edwin to show up. We were getting more protocols. We developed a sign-off for the owners asking if they would let us spay and neuter that pet while we had it if it wasn't already, if they could play in playgroup, if they were dog-friendly. We developed more relationships with those human service agencies so that we could help them before they came to us. We started doing vaccine clinics at the local transitional housing center so that those pets could go into housing more easily. We brought them extra supplies so that the people who were unhoused with their pets could have dog food and poop bags and leashes with them when they went out. So it helped us really gain some of that nonprofit support locally because I don't think animal welfare is great about collaborating with human service. They kind of see us separately. So it helped them start to see our benefits to people. It helped us keep a lot of pets and people together. And while we still didn't have the huge formalized foster program for them, I think we only had 1 or 2 instances where the families were not able to come back and reunite with their pets at the end. So it worked out really well for us. It was great for the animals, and it was one of our favorite programs that we had because we really got to see that connection with everyone.
All right.
We already have some answers.
Yeah, people are already in. So now we want to hear from you guys. What programs, Did I touch something? Are you excited, or would you like to kick off, or are you excited to kick off as you leave the conference now? You've had a couple days to get inspired. What programs are you going to be looking into expanding or adding? Type in your answers here if you can. We got Alexander on full-time duty today.
I'm trying to swipe. Where did it go? There it goes.
There we go.
No.
Now we got to go forward.
No problem.
Yeah, it's there. Yeah.
There we go. All right. We'll give everybody a couple minutes. What other things are you hoping to kick off post-conference? So day trips for dogs, people looking to expand their crisis foster, finder to foster, that is a passion of ours. So love to see that that's something people are considering more of. Finder to foster. We've ignited a movement, Sarah. We've ignited a movement. Crisis foster still on there. Walk-in volunteers, monthly donors, more robust foster programs. We need it all, right? The reality is where we're at right now is we're at 83% as a live release rate for the nation, right? That last 7% we know is the hardest. And so it really is sort of our responsibility of everybody in this room to figure out how to build capacity and save more animals. So we have to kind of throw caution to the wind. We have to jump feet first into whatever that is, the next layer of life saving that needs to be happening in your organization or your community. Take ownership of it now, right? We only have a few more months, right? We've got 10 months for us to see where we can move that needle. And again, that 90%, we know that number shifts, right? I'm not locked in on that 100%, but we have a goal and we're shooting for it. And I think as we all are self-reflective, we all know where there's areas for improvement within our organization that are going to allow us to increase that life saving. So let's make it happen. Finder to foster, you don't have to have it all solidified, I promise you. We started doing it before we ever had an SOP about it, before we ever really knew what we were doing, before we were even staying in good contact with people. It was not it was a flawed program, but it allowed us to help more animals. And then we piloted it, we perfected it, and now we have a full-blown program that we run very consistently. All right, one more Mentimeter. Alexander, you might just have to stay up here with us. We promise we practice, but this is just... So the next question we're going to ask you if you're still in the app is, what barriers do you see? What are you anticipating challenging this new program goal that you want to have, or challenging the expansion of the program that you put on in the previous survey?
Last slide.
I think we're here. So what barriers exist to creating that program? Time, right? It's not on our side. It never feels like it's on our side. Capacity, right? Every day we're dealing with that. Staff. Do we have enough money? Do we have enough time? Do we have enough people?
I mean, time and capacity, that's your community. The more you can engage them, get the volunteers in there, they're gonna help you make time. They're gonna help you make capacity by using the fosters. Like, it's really realizing that no kill is a community effort and nobody can do it alone. So if there are others in your community willing to jump in, like, let them. Even if it's not the way you think you may do it just exactly yourself, by kind of releasing that control, it's gonna really increase that capacity that you have for life saving. And funding and money, definitely, like, always a struggle, figuring out how to do something the most cheaply, getting donations, I had a volunteer, she was not my development person, she was a retired secretary from Purdue, but she loved to ask for stuff. Aggie would go to every business in town and see what they would give us for free. Sometimes it was things we didn't really need, but Aggie was out there getting us whatever in-kind donation she could round up. If she was in a store, she was asking what they would give to the shelter for the animals. And it was definitely a way that we were able to increase what we took in, because I started as executive director with a $300,000 deficit in our budget. So we did not have the money to create new programs. We needed to cut programs. And all I said was, I will cut anything except for something that relates directly to animal care. So we went through and we were bargain hunting and hunting for things for free and duct taping and wiring our kennels back together. But we closed most of our deficit and we saved more animals by the end.
All right, so we'll leave you with our contact information, of course. We encourage you as you head back into your communities to throw out the idea of perfection, throw it out the window, learn to live in the gray. And if you need any life coaching on that, my whole life is living in the gray, so definitely, definitely shoot me an email, all right?
Yeah,
Thank you guys
if you
so
have
much.
any questions, you can see us out in the hallway.
What do we need to tell them about the night thing?
About, it was up there on the first.